The planet Valdrix had been called many things by the thousand species of the Galactic Coalition. Some called it the Death World, others named it the Forbidden Sphere. But those who truly understood its nature simply called it the Throne of Beasts. On this world lived creatures that made the most dangerous predators of 100 planets look like harmless pets. The Korath were massive beings that stood 12 feet tall at the shoulder, covered in scales that could deflect plasma fire, with claws that could tear through starship hull plating like paper. Their eyes glowed with an intelligence that went far beyond simple animal instinct. They were apex predators, not just in body, but in mind. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Coalition had studied the Korath from orbit. They had sent probes, drones, and robots to observe these magnificent and terrifying creatures. What they discovered had changed everything the galaxy understood about intelligence and power. The Korath could communicate, not through crude sounds or simple gestures, but through a complex telepathic bond that allowed them to share thoughts, memories, and emotions. They formed family groups that operated with military precision. They built structures from stone and wood that served purposes no alien scientist could fully understand. And most importantly, they had a ritual that occurred once every century. They chose a guardian. The guardian was not one of their own. Throughout recorded history, the Korath had always selected a member of another species to serve as their representative to the outside galaxy. This being would live among them, learn their ways, and speak for them in dealings with other worlds. The position was considered the highest honor any species could receive, a recognition that the chosen individual possessed qualities the Korath deemed worthy of their respect. For 3,000 years, the Guardians had always come from the elder races of the galaxy. The Volanthi, with their 6 arms and crystal-enhanced telepathy, had provided 7 Guardians. The Moraxian Empire, whose warriors were born in volcanic chambers and could survive in the vacuum of space, had given 5. Even the peaceful Silanthri, beings of pure light who had transcended physical form 10,000 years ago, had once been honored with the selection. No one expected what happened in the year 4847 of the Coalition calendar. Commander Elena Vasquez of the Earth Alliance research vessel Horizon had not asked to be on Valdrix. She had been sent there against her objections, assigned to replace a scientist who had suffered a mental breakdown after 3 months of observing the Korath from orbital distance. Her mission was simple: maintain the observation station, collect data, and avoid any contact with the surface. Elena was 42 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and scars on her hands from a lifetime of service in difficult places. She had fought in the Periphery Wars, survived the collapse of Station Omega, and spent 2 years alone on an ice world when her rescue ship was delayed. The Earth Alliance had labeled her as someone who could handle isolation and pressure. They had sent her to Valdrix because they believed she was too tough to break. They were right about that, but they had not understood what that toughness would mean. On her 73rd day aboard the orbital station, Elena watched through the observation cameras as a young Korath was attacked by a rival pack. The creature, smaller than the others and clearly not yet fully grown, was being driven toward the edge of a cliff. The other Korath were not trying to kill it, Elena realized. They were testing it. This was some kind of trial, a rite of passage that would determine whether the young one was worthy of adulthood. The young Korath failed. It slipped on the loose stone at the cliff's edge and fell. Elena watched it tumble down the rocky surface, its scales providing some protection but not enough. It landed at the bottom of a ravine, surrounded on all sides by walls too steep to climb. And then the worst thing happened. A pack of Skethrak emerged from the caves at the base of the ravine. Skethrak were the only creatures on Valdrix that hunted Korath. They were smaller, faster, and they attacked in coordinated swarms of dozens or hundreds. A full-grown Korath could fight them off, but a young one, injured and trapped, would be torn apart in minutes. Elena did not think about protocol. She did not consider the regulations that forbade surface contact. She did not remember the 17 pages of documentation she had signed, promising never to interfere with native wildlife. She grabbed an emergency survival pack, ran to the shuttle bay, and launched herself toward the surface. The Coalition would later calculate that she had made the decision in less than 4 seconds. They would analyze the footage from her suit camera and marvel at the speed with which she had moved, the efficiency of her actions, the complete absence of hesitation. Some would call it reckless. Others would call it instinct. The Korath would call it something else entirely. Elena landed the shuttle at the top of the ravine, burning a path through the vegetation with the engine's exhaust. She grabbed a plasma torch from the emergency kit, the only weapon she had, and rappelled down the cliff face toward the injured young Korath. The Skethrak saw her coming. A dozen of them broke away from the pack and charged up the ravine wall toward her. They were fast, their many-jointed legs carrying them over the rock like water flowing uphill. Elena hung from her rope with one hand and fired the plasma torch with the other. She killed the first 3 before they reached her. The fourth got close enough to slash at her leg, tearing through her suit and drawing blood. Elena kicked it away, swung to the side, and burned 2 more out of the air as they leaped at her. Her blood dripped down onto the rocks below. The Skethrak could smell it. The entire swarm turned their attention from the injured Korath to this new prey. This strange creature that bled so easily but fought with such ferocity. Elena reached the bottom of the ravine. She stood between the swarm and the young Korath, her plasma torch running low on fuel, blood running down her leg into her boot. The Skethrak circled around her, hundreds of them now, their clicking sounds filling the air like a nightmare symphony. The young Korath made a sound. It was not a cry for help or a sound of fear. It was something else, something Elena could not understand but could somehow feel. It resonated in her chest, in her bones, in some part of her brain that humans did not use but still possessed. She felt others responding. From the top of the cliff, the adult Korath appeared. They had followed the young one's fall, had watched from above as it faced its trial. They had not interfered because that was not their way. The young must prove themselves or die. That was the law of Valdrix, unchanging for millions of years. But now they saw something that their laws had not anticipated. They saw a creature from another world, small and fragile and bleeding, standing alone against impossible odds to protect one of their young. They saw her fear, clearly visible in every line of her body, but also saw that she did not run. They felt her heartbeat, racing so fast it should have made her collapse, but also felt the iron control she maintained over every muscle. And they felt something else. They felt the thing that humans called many names: stubbornness, defiance, the refusal to surrender even when surrender was the only logical option. Some humans called it courage, others called it spite. The Korath, reaching out with their telepathic senses, found no word in any language that fully captured what they perceived. The leader of the adult pack, a massive scarred creature that had lived for over 200 years, descended the cliff face. The Skethrak fled before it, their survival instincts overriding their hunger. Within seconds, the swarm had disappeared into their caves, leaving Elena alone with the young Korath and the approaching adults. Elena raised her plasma torch, knowing it was useless, knowing she was about to die, but refusing to accept that knowledge. The old Korath stopped 3 feet away from her. It was close enough that she could smell its breath, hot and strange, like volcanic stone, and something sweeter underneath. Its eyes, larger than her head, studied her with an intelligence that made her feel like a child being examined by an ancient philosopher. Then it did something that no Korath had ever done to a member of any species in 3,000 years of recorded observation. It lowered its head. The gesture meant nothing to Elena. She did not know that among the Korath, lowering the head was a sign of recognition between equals. She did not know that it was the gesture used only between pack leaders who had proven themselves in combat. She did not know that by making this gesture, the old Korath was declaring her not a prey animal, not an observer, not an outsider. It was declaring her a fellow predator. The other adult Korath descended and surrounded her. Elena stood perfectly still, her plasma torch still raised, her wounded leg screaming in pain. She watched as they moved around her, their massive bodies brushing against her without harming her, their telepathic signals washing over her mind like waves of warm water. She felt their curiosity, their surprise, their growing respect. And underneath all of that, she felt their recognition of something they had never encountered before in all their long history as the rulers of their world. They had found someone like themselves. The young Korath rose to its feet, its injuries already beginning to heal with the remarkable regenerative ability of its species. It approached Elena and pressed its head against her shoulder, a gesture she would later learn was the Korath equivalent of gratitude. When the sun set over Valdrix that night, Elena Vasquez had not returned to her orbital station. She stood in the center of the Korath pack, surrounded by creatures that could kill her with a single swipe of their claws, and she was not afraid. The Coalition received her transmission 3 hours later. "This is Commander Vasquez. I am safe. I am remaining on the surface. The Korath have accepted me. I don't know what that means yet, but I think something important is happening here. I need you to trust me. I need you to wait." The Coalition did not wait. They sent a diplomatic vessel immediately, carrying representatives from 7 species who demanded to know what had happened, what protocols had been broken, and what consequences would follow. They arrived on the 94th day of Elena's mission. What they found changed the galaxy forever. Ambassador Thenrix of the Valanthi Collective had served in galactic diplomacy for 300 years. He had negotiated treaties that ended wars, mediated disputes between species that had been enemies for millennia, and once convinced a dying star to delay its supernova by 17 hours to allow the evacuation of a colony world. His 6 arms were decorated with the ceremonial rings of 100 successful missions, and his crystalline telepathic amplifier had been enhanced 17 times to increase his mental capabilities. None of that prepared him for what he found on Valdrix. The diplomatic vessel landed at the coordinates Elena had transmitted. Thenrix emerged first, flanked by warriors from 4 different species and surrounded by a protective energy shield that could withstand a direct hit from a starship weapon. Behind him came observers, scientists, and military advisors from across the Coalition. They found Elena Vasquez sitting cross-legged on a flat stone, surrounded by 17 adult Korath and 4 young ones. She was eating something that looked like raw meat, and there was dried blood on her hands and face. Her uniform was torn, her hair was tangled, and she looked more alive than any human Thenrix had ever seen. "Ambassador," she said, not standing up, "you're early. Commander Vasquez, you are in violation of 17 Coalition regulations regarding contact with protected species. You have contaminated an ongoing scientific observation. You have risked an interstellar incident, and you appear to be eating a native life form without proper biological screening." Elena swallowed the meat she was chewing. "It's good. Tastes like beef. Want some?" Thenrix's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. His telepathic senses reached out toward Elena, trying to understand her emotional state, and encountered something he had never experienced before. She was completely calm. Not the artificial calm of someone suppressing their emotions, but the genuine peace of someone who had found exactly where they belonged. Her mind was clear, focused, and utterly unafraid. The Korath around her shifted their positions. Thenrix felt their attention turn toward him, and he experienced something that very few beings in the galaxy had ever felt. He felt small. "Commander," he said, struggling to maintain his diplomatic composure, "you must return to orbit immediately. Whatever connection you believe you have formed with these creatures, it cannot supersede coalition law." The oldest Korath, the same scarred leader who had bowed to Elena 20 days earlier, rose from its resting position. It moved toward Thenrix with the slow, deliberate pace of a creature that had never needed to hurry for anything in its life. The energy shield around Thenrix flickered as his fear spiked despite his training. Elena stood up then, moving to position herself between the ambassador and the Korath. "Easy," she said, and it was unclear whether she was speaking to Thenrix or to the massive predator behind her. "Nobody needs to get hurt here. Commander, step away from that creature. Our weapons are trained. Your weapons won't do anything except make them angry." Elena's voice was patient, like someone explaining something obvious to a confused child. "These aren't animals, Ambassador. I know that's what the Coalition has classified them as for 3,000 years, but you're wrong. They're people. They're people who happen to have 4 legs and scales and claws that can cut through anything in the known galaxy." Thenrix's crystalline amplifier hummed as he reached out with his enhanced telepathy, trying to verify Elena's claims. What he found made him take an involuntary step backward. The Korath were not just intelligent. They were ancient. Their collective memory stretched back millions of years, passed down from generation to generation through their telepathic bonds. They remembered when their world was young and the stars were different in the sky. They remembered the first ships that came from the darkness above, bringing strange creatures that watched from orbit and sent machines to study them. And they remembered deciding to let the galaxy believe they were merely animals. "They've been watching us," Thenrix whispered. "All this time. They've been watching and waiting and judging." "Yes," Elena said. "They wanted to see if the galaxy was worthy of real contact. They wanted to see if anyone would look at them and see what they truly are, instead of what they appeared to be." "And you did?" Elena shook her head. "No, I didn't see anything. I just saw a kid in trouble and I helped. That's all, but apparently that was the right answer to a test I didn't know I was taking." The old Korath moved past Elena and stopped directly in front of Thenrix. The ambassador's guards raised their weapons, but Thenrix held up 3 of his hands in a gesture that ordered them to stand down. The creature's voice entered his mind. It was not words exactly, but concepts and images and emotions that translated themselves into meaning. Thenrix gasped as the message became clear. "We have chosen. The choice has never been about strength or wisdom or technology. The choice is about what a being does when they have nothing to gain and everything to lose. The choice is about the moment when survival instinct says run, and something deeper says stand. For 3,000 years, your galaxy has sent its best, your strongest warriors, your wisest philosophers, your most powerful telepaths. They came armored in technology, shielded in ceremony, protected by protocols. Not one of them would have climbed down that cliff. Not one of them would have stood between a child and death with nothing but a failing weapon and the will to fight. This human did. She did not know she was being watched. She did not calculate the political advantages of her action. She did not consider her career or her species or the judgment of history. She saw suffering and she moved to stop it. That is the quality we have sought. That is what makes a guardian." Thenrix fell to his knees. The knowledge flooding through his mind was overwhelming. He was seeing the true nature of the Korath for the first time, understanding that everything the galaxy thought it knew was wrong. The Korath were not studying the universe from their isolated world. They were waiting for the universe to prove itself. They were waiting for a sign that the creatures who flew between the stars had not lost the essential quality that made life worth preserving. "What happens now?" Thenrix asked aloud, unable to maintain the telepathic link any longer. Elena answered, "Now I stay. The selection ceremony happens in 3 days. I'll be formally named as Guardian, whatever that means, and then I'll serve as their voice to the Coalition. For how long? For as long as they need me. Maybe forever." Thenrix looked at her, this human woman who had accidentally passed a test that entire civilizations had failed. "You understand what you're giving up? Your career, your species, your world. You'll be alone here for the rest of your life." Elena laughed. It was a genuine sound, full of real joy. "Ambassador, look around. Does this look like being alone to you?" The Korath had formed a circle around them during the conversation. Young ones pressed against Elena's legs, seeking her warmth. Adults positioned themselves between her and the Coalition soldiers, protective despite knowing she faced no real threat. The old leader had settled down beside her stone seat, its massive head resting near where she would sit. "I spent 30 years in space, Ambassador. I've been on 100 worlds. I've served with 1,000 species. And I have never, not once, felt like I belonged anywhere." She gestured at the creatures surrounding her. Until now. The selection ceremony was unlike anything the Coalition observers had expected. They had prepared for something primitive, some kind of ritual involving blood and combat, and displays of physical prowess. Instead, the Korath gathered at sunset in a natural amphitheater carved into the mountains over millions of years. Thousands of them came from across the continent, moving through the landscape in great migrations that had not been seen since before the Coalition made first contact. Elena stood in the center of the amphitheater, dressed in clothes the Korath had helped her make from local materials. She looked small against the massive stone walls, tiny among the creatures that surrounded her. The ceremony began with silence. The Korath turned their attention inward, sharing memories and thoughts through their telepathic network. The Coalition observers, even those with the strongest mental abilities, could only catch fragments of what was being communicated. They shared the memory of Elena's descent down the cliff. They passed it from mind to mind, each Korath experiencing it as if they had been there. They felt her fear, her determination, her refusal to turn back even when every rational calculation said she should flee. Then they shared their own memories, stories of Korath who had shown the same quality throughout their history, mothers who had faced impossible odds to protect their young, fathers who had stood alone against natural disasters to give their families time to escape, elders who had sacrificed themselves so that knowledge could be preserved. The message was clear. Elena was not being honored because she was special among humans. She was being honored because she had proven that humans possessed the same essential quality that defined the Korath themselves. The willingness to fight when fighting meant death. The refusal to calculate when calculation meant abandoning someone in need. The deep, irrational, magnificent stubbornness that made certain creatures stand when every sensible being would run. As the last light of the sun disappeared behind the mountains, the old Korath leader approached Elena. It carried something in its mouth, holding it as gently as a mother holding a newborn. It was a crystal, glowing with soft blue light, carved in a shape that somehow suggested both a claw and a flame. Elena had never seen anything like it, but when the leader placed it in her hands, she understood immediately what it was. A key. With this crystal, she could enter any Korath territory on any world. She could speak with the authority of the entire species. She could make decisions that would bind them all. She was no longer just a representative. She was part of them. The Korath raised their voices in a sound that the Coalition observers would later describe as the most beautiful and terrifying thing they had ever heard. It was not a roar or a song. but something in between, a harmonic that seemed to resonate with the stones and the air and the light itself. Elena held the crystal against her chest and felt something she had never expected. She felt home. The Coalition vessel departed the next morning, carrying Thenrix and his observers back to the wider galaxy. They brought with them recordings, data, and a preliminary report that would take months to fully process. But the most important thing they brought was a message. The Korath were ready to speak with the galaxy. After 3,000 years of watching and waiting, they had found what they were looking for. A guardian who embodied the quality they valued above all others. The message spread across the Coalition within days. Species that had spent centuries trying to understand the Korath demanded explanations. Military leaders worried about what it meant that the deadliest creatures in the known galaxy had chosen a human as their representative. Scientists argued about the implications for everything they thought they knew about intelligence and evolution. And underneath all of that, a question began to form in minds across 1,000 worlds. What was it about humans that the Korath had seen? The answer, when it finally came, would change everything. 6 months after Elena Vasquez became the guardian of the Korath, the Galactic Coalition convened an emergency summit. Representatives from every major species gathered on the neutral station called the Confluence, a massive structure that floated between stars and served as neutral ground for matters that affected the entire galaxy. The topic was humanity. Chancellor Vreth of the Meraxian Empire stood before the assembled delegates, his volcanic skin glowing with the heat of controlled anger. We have tolerated the humans in our coalition for 2 centuries. We accepted them despite their youth, despite their chaos, despite their disturbing tendency to involve themselves in matters that do not concern them. But this has gone too far. He activated a holographic display that showed Elena standing among the Korath, the blue crystal glowing in her hands. A human has been named Guardian of the Apex Predators of Valdrix, the creatures that have refused meaningful contact with every advanced civilization for 3,000 years have chosen a member of a species that has barely mastered interstellar travel. The Salanthri representative, appearing as a column of golden light, pulsed with what might have been amusement. And this concerns you because it makes no sense. Vreth's fist slammed against the podium, leaving a scorch mark. The Korath are the most powerful biological entities in the known galaxy. Their selection of a guardian has always reflected the strength of the chosen species. They selected us because we can survive anything. They selected the Valanthi because of their mental powers. They selected your kind because you have transcended physical form entirely. And they selected the human because she climbed down a cliff, the Salanthri observed. Fascinating. It is not fascinating. It is an insult to every species that has worked for millennia to earn the Korath's respect. A new voice entered the conversation, transmitted from Valdrix itself. Elena Vasquez appeared in holographic form at the center of the chamber, her image surrounded by the massive shapes of Korath who had gathered to witness this moment. Chancellor Vreth, with respect, you don't understand what happened. None of you do. Vreth's skin flared brighter. Then explain, human. Explain what makes your species worthy of an honor that has been denied to civilizations older than your entire evolutionary history. Elena looked at the assembled representatives, beings of light and fire and crystal and forms that human minds could barely comprehend. She had spent 6 months learning from the Korath, absorbing their memories, understanding their perspective on a galaxy that had watched them for 3,000 years without truly seeing them. The Korath didn't choose me, she said. They recognized me. Confusion rippled through the chamber. Thenrix, who had remained silent until now, leaned forward. Explain, Guardian. The Korath are apex predators. On their world, they sit at the top of the food chain. Nothing hunts them. Nothing threatens them. They evolved to be the most dangerous creatures on a planet that is more dangerous than almost anywhere else in the galaxy. Elena paused, letting that sink in. They thought they were unique. They thought that being an apex predator meant being alone at the top, with no equals anywhere in the universe. The holographic display shifted, showing images of Earth, forests and deserts and oceans and cities. Then they started watching the galaxy. They saw the Moraxians, born in fire, nearly indestructible. They saw the Valanthi, whose minds could reach across light years. They saw the Silanthri, who had conquered death itself. Impressive species, powerful species. Elena's voice hardened, but not apex predators. Vreth's flames dimmed slightly. What do you mean? Your species evolved on worlds where you were the most powerful things from the beginning. You never had to fight for survival against creatures stronger than you. You never had to climb to the top of the food chain through nothing but determination and cleverness and refusal to die. Elena smiled, and there was something in that smile that made several delegates uncomfortable. Humans did. The display changed again, showing Earth's evolutionary history. Cave paintings of humans facing mammoths and lions and wolves. Ancient battles against creatures that should have been too strong, too fast, too deadly for a species with no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. We started as prey, Elena said. We were small, weak, slow. Everything on our world could kill us, and we survived anyway. We didn't evolve special powers or indestructible bodies. We evolved something else. Persistence, Thenrix whispered, understanding beginning to dawn. More than that. We evolved the ability to look at something bigger and stronger and more dangerous than ourselves and say, I'm going to fight that anyway. Not because we thought we would win. Sometimes we knew we would lose. But we fought anyway, because that's what apex predators do. They don't run. They don't hide. They stand their ground, and they make the universe respect them. The Korath in the transmission began to move, their massive bodies creating a wall behind Elena. Their voices joined in a low harmonic that vibrated through the chamber's speakers. The Korath saw themselves in us, Elena continued. They recognize the look in our eyes because they see it in their own reflections. The absolute refusal to accept defeat. The willingness to die on our feet rather than live on our knees. The crazy, stupid, magnificent stubbornness that makes us run toward danger instead of away from it. She held up the Guardian crystal, its light filling the holographic projection. They didn't choose me because I was strong or wise or powerful. They chose me because when I saw that young Korath in trouble, I didn't calculate my odds. I didn't consider my safety. I didn't think about protocols or regulations or career advancement. I saw someone in danger and every part of me said no. Not on my watch. Not while I'm still breathing. Chancellor Vreth's flames had dimmed to a low glow. When he spoke, his voice had lost its anger. That is what they value? Simple stubbornness? It's not simple at all. It's the rarest thing in the universe. Elena's voice softened. Most species, when they encounter something they can't defeat, they adapt. They find ways around it. They negotiate, or surrender, or retreat. These are sensible strategies. They're how intelligent beings survive. But apex predators don't just survive, Thenrix said, finally understanding. They dominate. They dominate, Elena agreed. And the only way to dominate when you're outmatched is to refuse to accept that you're outmatched. To keep fighting after any sensible creature would have stopped. To make your enemies fear you not because you're stronger, but because you simply will not stop. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For 3,000 years, the Korath had watched the galaxy's most powerful civilizations send their best representatives. Warriors who had never faced true adversity. Telepaths who solved problems by understanding them. Beings of pure energy, who had long ago forgotten what it meant to struggle. None of them had the thing the Korath were looking for. The old Korath leader, the one who had first bowed to Elena, moved to stand beside her holographic image. Its telepathic voice resonated through the translation systems. You build your civilizations on the assumption that progress means leaving your predator nature behind. You believe that true advancement means becoming peaceful, rational, controlled. The Korath view this as a kind of death. We are not interested in civilizations that have forgotten how to fight. We are not interested in species that solve all their problems through technology or diplomacy or transcendence. We are interested in those who still carry the fire of the hunt within them. For 3,000 years, we searched for that fire in your galaxy. We found it in the humans. The old leader turned to look directly at Vreth. Your species is powerful, Chancellor. Your people can survive conditions that would kill almost anything else in the universe. But when was the last time a Meraxian fought against impossible odds, not because they had to, but because someone else needed them to? When was the last time one of your people threw themselves into certain death to protect a stranger? Vreth had no answer. The Salanthri representative pulsed thoughtfully. You are saying that humanity's value lies not in what they can do, but in what they choose to do. Elena nodded. Every species in this chamber is more powerful than humans. Your technology is better, your bodies are stronger, your minds are faster. By any objective measure, we're one of the weakest species in the coalition. She stepped forward, and somehow her holographic image seemed to fill the entire chamber. But when the galaxy faces something it cannot defeat, something that requires not strength but will, something that needs beings who will stand in the fire and refuse to burn, who do you think you're going to call? The question hung in the air. The Korath have survived for millions of years because they never forgot what they are, Elena said. They are predators, not because they kill, but because they refuse to be prey. They refuse to accept any threat as insurmountable. They refuse to bow to any power, no matter how great. And humans share this quality, Thenrik said. It was not a question. We share it because we evolved the same way. We started with nothing, and we conquered our world through sheer determination. Every other species in this chamber evolved dominance. We earned it. The summit continued for several more hours, but the essential truth had been spoken. When the delegates departed, they carried with them a new understanding of humanity and of the universe itself. The news spread across the galaxy in waves. Species that had dismissed humans as primitive newcomers began to pay closer attention. Military strategists reconsidered their assumptions about human capabilities. Philosophers debated the nature of the apex predator spirit and whether it could be cultivated or only inherited. On Earth, the response was mixed. Some humans felt proud to be recognized as fellow predators by the Korath. Others were uncomfortable with the implications, worried that this validation of humanity's violent nature might lead them down dark paths. But Elena Vasquez, standing on the surface of Valdrix with her new family around her, knew the truth that lay beneath all the debates and discussions. Humanity's strength was not in their aggression. It was not in their willingness to fight. It was in their willingness to fight for others. The Korath had not chosen her because she was dangerous. They had chosen her because she had shown that human stubbornness, that apex predator refusal to retreat, could be directed toward protection instead of conquest. She had risked her life not to prove her dominance, but to save a child who was not her own, not her species, not even her kind of life form. That was the truth that became clear when the apex beasts of Valdrix appointed a human guardian. The most dangerous creatures in the universe could recognize their own kind, and they had looked at humanity, small, short-lived, fragile humanity, and seen not prey, not competition, not potential servants or allies. They had seen family. Years later, when historians wrote about the turning point in human galactic relations, they would focus on the political implications, the military analyses, the philosophical debates. They would discuss the treaties that followed, the alliances that formed, the changes in how other species viewed the young civilization from Earth. But Elena, now gray-haired and wrinkled but still standing straight among her Korath family, knew that all of those grand historical narratives missed the point. The truth was simpler and more profound. Sometimes the most important quality a being can possess is the willingness to run toward danger when everyone else is running away. Sometimes the measure of a species is not what they can destroy, but what they are willing to die to protect. And sometimes the apex predators of the universe recognize each other not by their fangs or claws or power, but by the light in their eyes that says, "I will not abandon you. I will not leave you behind. I will stand here until my body breaks, because that is what I am." The Korath had searched the galaxy for 3,000 years to find beings who shared that light. They found it in humanity. And the universe was never the same.